Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first interview for this webinar focusing on embedding Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives into family daycare practice. And for this interview, I'm very pleased to be welcoming Ron Timbery, who is the Senior Policy Officer in the Cultural Safety Team, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about that as we progress in the Department of Education for New South Wales. And before I welcome you officially, Ron, and get you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the country that you're on, I want to also acknowledge that I'm here on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi people up in Queensland. It's a fantastic place to be. So, Ron, perhaps we can start by you telling us a little bit about where you are and your role.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. My name's Ron Timbery. I'm an Aboriginal man from the Laperouse Aboriginal community. Lapa, as we call it, is located on the northern shores of Botany Bay, about 15 kilometres south of Sydney City, one of the communities of first contact. The community's still there today. We're a very resilient community. All of Sydney has grown around us, but we still remain on our traditional lands. My clan is the Bidjigal clan, and we're a part of the Dharawal Nation or the Dharawal language group. I work in the cultural safety team, as we mentioned, and the cultural safety team is part of the regulatory authority. We're an Aboriginal team, first of its kind, and created to develop and create the cultural safety framework for the early childhood sector, and really pleased to be here today.
Well, we look forward to hearing a bit more about that work that you've been doing, because indeed it is a first of its kind, and something that our family daycare educators who are tuning in today can actually be a part of. And I really encourage people to have a bit of a look at that, but I will talk a little bit about that as we progress. Right at the beginning of this conversation, perhaps we can focus our attention on how important it is to incorporate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives into our family daycare programs. As, of course, you know, and lots of our educators who are tuning in today know, that it's a really important expectation now in terms of the way we undertake our work. But maybe from your perspective, Ron, and just to hear from you as an Aboriginal man in New South Wales, about why it's so important to incorporate these ideas and embed these ideas into our practice.
Yeah, absolutely, Catherine. I'm new to early childhood, only been in the sector about 14 months, but I've been in Aboriginal affairs a long time. But for me, I think it's really important because I think children need to see themselves, their families and their communities in what they're experiencing, what they're learning in early childcare services. Sadly, or not sadly, but the situation is that a lot of the early childcare sector now has a Western orientation, and there's not a lot of Aboriginal content in the sector. That's becoming it's becoming more and more high profile now, or more and more raised more often. It's in the early childcare national law under the guiding principles. It's also in the early years learning frameworks. It's Aboriginal content is really important because Aboriginal kids need to see themselves. I can talk from experience because when I was a kid, I didn't see much of myself in what I was learning. I learned about Captain Cook, and I learned about Governor Macquarie. I even learned about the bushranger Ned Kelly, but I didn't learn about Aboriginal men and women and Aboriginal communities and what they learned. So Aboriginal people, we sometimes say we walk in two worlds, and I think we do. I think it's very apt. So it is really important to have more Aboriginal content, not only for Aboriginal kids, for them to see themselves and for them to develop their own identities, but also for all Australian kids. There's a gap. There's definitely a gap. It's a deficit sort of word, but I think we all need to, contribute to closing that gap. And, early childcare services and family daycare is a great place to start.
Absolutely. And you talk about that idea of children growing up strong and proud, and that other children around them have a very strong sense of it. And there will be people who are joining us, Ron, who say, I didn't get taught that stuff either. And I think one of the big things that we need to continue to think about, and we'll talk a bit about that as we progress, is actually being a bit proactive and learning more yourself if you feel like you don't know. And there's great places to go, including all the amazing work that you've been doing as well. I think one of the things that sometimes happens in family daycare and in early childhood education across the board is that we sometimes do some work around engaging with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives in our programs. And I think particularly here we would want to encourage people to think about what their local Aboriginal perspectives are, wherever they are around New South Wales, to, like do it 1 week. You do it in sort of NAIDOC week or something like that. But I think increasingly we're trying to say maybe think about how you can do it woven all the way through the teaching and learning that you would do every day. Can you share a little bit of thoughts about how we might think about it in a more holistic way, not just a once off?
Yeah, I think the NAIDOC and things like that are a great place to start.
Yeah.
But they do seem one off and sometimes a bit tokenistic, from the Aboriginal perspective. But that's okay. Making a start is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And it really depends where you're at. Where your service is at, because I think, that gap that I talked about before and closing that gap, it's really for us all to be open to a learning journey. Yeah. Learning more about Aboriginal people and communities and culture, sharing our perspectives, respecting our perspectives, and being vulnerable, because no one knows everything. We need to just and not one is better than the other.
Yeah.
We need to just to connect. We need to start talking and listening. Listening is really important.
Yeah.
Aboriginal people sometimes feel like they're not listened to. Government has contributed a lot to that. But that's the place to start in conversations, and it might be the journey, just taking little steps on top of NAIDOC. You might invite Aboriginal parents to come in to the centre, taking little steps just to enable that conversation to start talking, because we'll learn from our interaction and those conversations. And the more we learn, the more comfortable we'll feel together and in learning and interacting and working with one another. And, like I said before, I think, I sometimes feel that, I thought that, a lot of Australians don't know much about Aboriginal history, and that's a bit sad. We've got the oldest living culture in the world, and it's sad that a lot of Australians don't know a lot about that. So we've got to start somewhere, and take little steps, and not be afraid to, if we don't know a lot, or not be afraid of offending people. If we go in with the right intention, we're in a good place. Yeah.
I think it's a really important message, isn't it, Ron, to say it's now our obligation, our responsibility, our ethical obligation as professionals working in this space to act, not to have ignorance as an excuse, but to take a step. And as you say, it can be a little tiny step. And one of the great things too now is that there's so many resources out there, including the work that you're doing at the department to support that cultural safety idea. So there's lots of different possibilities, and this webinar is an opportunity to open that door, I think, for lots of educators. It also reminds me that there are some educators doing a great job too. They're really working hard. They're thinking about it over a long period of time, and I think you've reminded us it's important to keep stretching ourselves and learning more, and Ron would also incorporate us a bit about truth telling, and learning about what is the truth of our history and our lived experience now. So is that something that we should continue to think about? How do we learn more and grow more and talk about the truth?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. There are educators are doing an amazing job. I've been to the centres that I've been to. They're undervalued in society. The work that they do with children, is amazing, and through the work that we've done with the cultural safety framework, we know there's a lot of goodwill in the sector to about incorporating more Aboriginal content into the daily routines, that happen within services. We know that goodwill is there. There's some amazing people. You use the word stretched. There is a little bit, more people coming into the sector and more workers. That's, that's an area that's it's a bit of a frustration for the sector.
Yeah.
Like I said, their educators are undervalued, I think, and for the work that they do. But I don't like to think of incorporating Aboriginal content as being stretched. I really like it to, as I said, start small, but start to do things regularly. Whether it's an acknowledgement of country, finding out about your local area, having, some Aboriginal elders come in once a month and do storytelling with the kids, or, something like that, just and to slowly build it up and build it into a regular practice. I think that's really important. There is going to be part of that conversation and that connectedness. There's going to be some uncomfortable moments, because there are some things that that weren't that good that happened in our history. But we're growing as a nation, and and we're thinking, about our children and the future generations. So, learning more about Aboriginal culture, accepting what's happened and respecting what's happened, and giving them an opportunity to learn more is the most important thing. I think that's, all Australian kids will benefit from the connectiveness that we endeavour and we strive for now. It'll be better for future generations.
And hopefully we raise children across the board in family daycare settings who feel like they know more. They feel proud of the country that they're growing up on. And, we hear children all the time talking to their parents saying, we know whose country this is, and we know what the flags mean. So this sort of confidence with young children is a really amazing contribution that we make, as you say, for the here and now, but into the future. And maybe it's great. It's a good timing to talk about the work you're doing with the cultural safety framework, because, as you say, it's really innovative work, and it's something that I know many people have talked about. It's great that there's work happening in New South Wales, and family daycare educators can be a part of that. Can you tell us a little bit about what that work is and how our family daycare educators can be a part of it into the future?
Yeah, absolutely. You use the word confidence in younger children, and isn't it fantastic to see?
Amazing.
When the kids, when you see that flowing through them, and I think that's one of the, if we get it right with the cultural safety framework, that's one of the things that we'll see more of.
Yeah, great.
In our kids, because I think it was the vision, like the framework that we're developing. It's part of the department's early childhood education and care, Aboriginal children's early childhood education and care strategy. And the vision is for all Aboriginal children to be, just a minute, where is it? I think it's to be, to give it a great start to lifelong learning.
Great.
And for their culture to be supported and nurtured by early childhood services. So that's one of the things, and that's why it's so important. If we can introduce more Aboriginal culture and knowledge and raise the awareness and knowledge of children and ourselves, those kids, Aboriginal kids, will benefit. They're the primary beneficiaries because they will see their culture, they will see their people, in what they're learning each and every day. They won't be absent from that picture, so they're the first and foremost beneficiaries. But other children will learn as well, and those gaps that I mentioned before will be less, because an Aboriginal child that doesn't see their place in what they're learning every day, by the time they leave that service, or some Aboriginal children aren't accessing early childhood services because they feel their culture and their is not supported. So they feel that what they're teaching the kids at home about their culture and their identity and isn't reflected in what they're learning in early childhood services. So that's really important. But through the framework, if we can change that and make some Aboriginal cultural practices and a daily part of what happens in an early childhood service, then they'll see themselves, and we'll see each other, and we'll be more comfortable in that space, and that confidence will grow, So for all those children, and look out then, because just nurturing that culture and that identity, at such a young age, there's so much potential in all our children. It's just a really good thing. It's long overdue, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think our family daycare educators out there have got the potential. Some of them are doing it right now, but others are just taking those steps to be able to send a very powerful message, as you say, to the community more broadly, that this is a place you feel welcome. You can feel welcome here. We see you, we hear you, and we want to learn together. And I think the potential of that is really high. And I guess giving a framework to that is going to help people make those decisions in ways that are respectful and authentic. And really that framework is also going to help people build their own confidence too about how they're making those decisions, because it's been created in such a collaborative way. And I wanted to remind people that they can access some material online about that. They can find out all about it. I've had a look at some of the recordings about some of their consultations, and they've been really powerful, and they help you as a non-Indigenous person to learn more about what's going on in New South Wales, which is really exciting. So people can be a part of it in now and into the future, Ron. They can just tap into what's happening by looking at the website.
Yeah, so the stage we're at, there's our website, and the best way to search is to enter on Google Cultural Safety Framework,
right?
And then look for it'll come up on the listing. So we've got a couple of webinars that we've done, talking to the sector about the framework. We've got a little bit of a history of what's happened so far, and where we are now is we've got a draft of a framework that still needs some work, but we think that we'll be able to share the framework with the sector towards the end of this year. Which is going to be really exciting when we go out and talk to services present the framework and get their ideas and their thoughts and their responses and comments. So, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. This, you know, but yeah, very exciting towards the latter stages of this year to be going out to the sector and sharing the framework and talking to them about it and you know, seeing where each service is at, because we're all, like you said, some are already doing lots of great stuff, and that's really great to see. Some maybe not so, but that's also, you know, that's also great. You know,
it's an opportunity, isn't it, Ron, for people to go, okay, now I'm feeling some inspiration and I'll get some ideas. Now I can start. Yeah,
and the framework will give people guidance on how to make a start, and there'll also be further down the track tools to support services in guiding them and enhancing their capacity to create more culturally safe spaces. So so it's really exciting, and really looking forward to, you know, that time and to engaging more with the sector about the cultural safety framework.
And I think there's your invitation, everybody, is to keep track of what's going on and keep checking in and looking forward to when that is more formally released. And I think too, Ron, it's about people, you know, feeling that they can ask questions and talk to each other as a team, because some of those things are about just learning together and saying, we're getting a bit of inspiration from a colleague who might be doing something a little bit different. And the nature of family daycare is that people work from their homes. So it's great sometimes to meet together with your family daycare colleagues, work with your approved provider, your coordination team, to come together and talk a little bit about what they're doing and maybe have a think about some of the material that is coming through from the Cultural Safety Framework website and look at that together as they move forward. So very exciting times in New South Wales to have this opportunity, and great that family daycare can be involved. One last question for you, Ron. One of the things that often is important, and we talk a lot about it in early childhood education, is the importance of building relationships. And I think in the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives space, and particularly in our focus around Aboriginal perspectives in New South Wales, building relationships with our local Aboriginal communities is really important. So if you're a beginning educator and you're thinking, I wonder how I do that, you know, should I just rock up at something? Should I just ring somebody? You know, if you've got some advice for some of our educators who perhaps are at the beginning of that process and want to start a relationship with local community, but are not quite sure where to start, can you give us a sense of what to do in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. Relationships is really, really important. It sort of underpins Aboriginal communities. It's keeps everything together, you know. So it is very important aspect. And in 2020, something that came out of a report that the department did was that Aboriginal parents, Aboriginal families felt they didn't belong. In you know, that they didn't have a sense of belonging with their early childcare service. So this is a really important first step. You know, if you have Aboriginal children and parents in your service, you know, have a chat with them. You know, try to build a relationship. Take your time with it. You know, don't sort of seem over enthusiastic, because a lot of Aboriginal parents already are under, you know, with work and with community obligations and things like that. There's something we call cultural load. That sort of is that a lot of Aboriginal people feel. Through work or through their community obligations. So sometimes when you reach out it might not be straight away coming back.
Yeah.
You might have to try a couple of times.
Mhm.
Invite those parents for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee. In a bit of a more relaxed setting.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But to start off,
Yeah.
and try and make it a regular thing, maybe once a month or something
Mhm.
like that, to build that relationship, because there is still an element of lack of trust as well
Mhm.
between with Aboriginal people
Mhm.
and Aboriginal communities about government and early childhood services
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So it's important to gain trust first,
Yeah.
and then if you can do that, well then you've got a great platform to begin with. But there's also relationships that you could build with. Maybe if you're a mainstream or a non-Aboriginal service, you might have an Aboriginal service close by that
Yeah.
might reach out to them, or an Aboriginal community organisation. You might reach out to them for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, just to begin conversations.
Yeah.
Let them know what you're doing and what your plans are, and they might be able to put you in touch with someone that can help in maybe providing guidance with building more Aboriginal cultural practices into your service. They might also be a little bit resistant too, because of that cultural load, or not wanting any or just feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
So so that's something to be a little bit mindful of. But the goodwill in the sector, it's a great opportunity as well.
Yeah.
And and I think once if you can explain the reasons behind your interest and and what you want to do at your service with the Aboriginal kids, or just all of the kids, about learning more about Aboriginal culture and having more Aboriginal content in your service, well then the Aboriginal people and Aboriginal community will they'll see the benefit straight away. And it's something that we've sort of been pining for many years. Been in the public service a long time, and maybe that's coming from that experience. But it's if once you let that be known, and you're seeking guidance and support, and from the community, I think that will open the door, definitely.
Yeah. And I love the reminder that you give us to go slowly and gently and authentically. And I hear from educators out there and from the broader Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community across Australia is we have to continue to show up and be part of the what's happening in community, and there might be events and important things that are going on in your community that you can come along to, and it shows that you're, as you say, you're interested and you keep being there, and then you get to know people, and that respect is born from that willingness to be a part of some of those conversations locally. And I think, as you say, it benefits all children, but very particularly for our conversation today, the Aboriginal children and the Torres Strait Islander children who might be in the communities where our family daycare educators are practicing. So, Ron, one piece of advice moving forward. I think you've already told us the really important one about going, trying something. Have you got another piece of advice for our family daycare educators out there who might be taking a first step?
Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to be vulnerable, because I know that can hold people back. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing or offending someone. And that might happen.
Yeah.
But we all make mistakes. And I think that's going to be part of it. Those awkward moments, maybe. But I think if we go in with the right intent, and the right meaning and purpose, and from the heart, we're really in a good place.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ron. It's been an absolute privilege to talk with you about these really important ideas, something that is now, as you say, central to the way we enact our early childhood education and care practice under the national law, but also within the updated early years learning framework. And I think on behalf of all of the family daycare educators out there, I think we commit ourselves to do better and to be more inclusive and to work together for a reconciled Australia. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity, Catherine.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.